Namaste. Thank you, sir, for the beautiful, kind words. For a moment, we let's live in one single introduction, and that is we as human beings who want to make this world a better place. I think there is hardly a human being who doesn't want this world to become a better place. Of course, the conceptions change. There is a type of humanity, unfortunately, majority of humanity, when they talk about making this world a better place, they are only thinking about making their own little life a better life in terms of outward life, money, gadgets, etc. Some extend beyond themselves to the family. There are some who are fortunate enough who start thinking about country, how to make our nation a better nation. And there are some who nowadays, there is a vaster cosmic sentiment spreading in humanity, which is a very beautiful sign of things to come, who think about humanity and going beyond humanity about earth as a whole. Now, when we think like this and when we feel like this, there are those who think about the earth as a whole, about humanity as a whole. And as I said, there is a subtle difference between thinking only about good of humanity and the good of earth. It is natural that we want to know something about what would be the future. When we look at our present, when we look at the situation, we want to understand what the future has been, is likely to be. Now, there are two ways of trying to understand the future. One is we go back into the past and see what has been happening till now. And based on that, we project into the future. The other is we make a leap of faith towards the future. There is no third way of knowing it. Because the moment we try to project into the future based on whatever is happening in the present, we are bound to fail because there are many new and unexpected things that come in life. Anybody who has lived life even for 20 years, 25 years knows that every step we take in life is filled with the unpredictable because of many things which are happening at any given point of time all around. Now, when we look into the past, not just 100 years, 200 years, 1000 years, but the past of earth, one thing is very evident, that there is something which has happened consistently on this planet. And that is evolution. Everything else we can deny. Now, if we take to the Buddhist philosophy or some other philosophies, they will say the only thing that is happening on this planet is change. Constantly everything is changing. But when we look at the change, does it have a direction? Does it have a purpose? Immediately our rational mind will show us there seems to be a directionality in the change, there seems to be a purpose in the change. Now, when we talk about that it's random play, we are not talking about the directionality, we are talking of the process. It may be a random play, chance, it all indicates that I really don't know what's working from behind. But one thing is for sure, that if we look at the journey of dust, from dust which had no other existence, which was sprinkled in the stars, settles into earth, and suddenly this dust one day, man will grow out of this dust and will pick up the same dust and it will create the possibility of internet. Now, this is what has happened over a period of time. Second, if we look at this change with a directionality and a purpose, we will see that in this change there are 3 or 4 elements which are constantly developing over a period of time as new and new forms appear. First is existence, because it exists, we use the word it exists. Whether we see it or we don't see it, that's not the issue. Things exist, they exist in space and time. Second that we see is that everything has some kind of a knowledge within it. Even the electron, the atom has a knowledge within it. So there is existence, there is knowledge, and we also see there is some force in everything, whether it be an atom, whether it be man, whether it be galaxies, whether it be animals, plant creation. And we see another very important thing, that there is in this entire existence something known as bliss or ananda or joy. These are 4 fundamental factors which we see all through running from dust to man. We may say that, but where is consciousness and where is joy in matter, in atom? The proof is very simple. Ask a human being when he is very stressed out, please go and look at the mountains. If you can't go to the mountains, just look at the internet picture of galaxies of mountains and rivers. Absolutely inanimate things. But when we look at them, we get joy. Why do we get joy? Because joy is inherent in creation. Even if we look at just the way an atom is built, it will give us a joy because it's inherent within each and every element. Now, if we really look at a little closer look, we will see that with the emergence of forms, all these four elements are undergoing a modification and they are also enhancing themselves. Take a few examples that existence. Now, till animal consciousness, there is an existence. In animals, there is the first glimmer of something like a self-existence. And in human beings, there is a very clear sense of I exist. I am, whatever be our understanding of the self. But the same existence begins to turn inwards and we develop something called as a self-existence. Take another thing like awareness. In electron, there is an elementary awareness. It makes its choices. I am not going to go into that detail because of paucity of time. But in human beings, the entire journey, I am just compressing. In human beings, the importance of conscious choices becomes so much more important. Because we are conscious beings, at least in some degree, to some degree, we try to understand, we try to make our own choices. So with existence, consciousness is increased, the force. Well, in animals, there is a brute force, and in plant, there is a rudimentary vital force. In atoms, there is infinite force but limited. In everything, there is an infinite force which is limited. But in human beings, this force takes a very different kind of turn. It becomes a force of knowledge. It becomes a force of love. It's no more a brute force, but it becomes modified under the human conditions. And yes, the joy, we see the joy running, climbing from atom through plant. You see, sometimes look at plants, the way they open to the sun, just looking at them can give joy. Look at a tree sometimes, the way it dances in the breeze. And then in animals, there is a kind of joy which we are well aware of. And in human beings, this joy begins to take subtler and subtler forms. The joy of poetry, the joy of creation, the joy of making something out of mud. Because in human beings, the joy that we experience has begun to become merge with the joy of the creator. So in human beings, something unique has appeared, that we have become miniature creators of our own world. Unlike the animal. In animals, we don't see this capacity of self-reflection, self-awareness, or this ability to create something new. But with human beings, we can pick up things and create something. So in human beings, we see a new impulse which has started right from million years old when the thinker was born in man, and that impulse has modified existence, modified its experience of existence, its experience of consciousness, its experience of force, and its experience of bliss, joy. Now, is this the end? Well, very logically, if we look at ourselves, we can say we don't need to read a book. We will say this cannot be the end. Somebody would ask, what is the proof? The proof is within our heart. We are never satisfied with what way things are. We are inherent, incorrigible dreamers. And we are not just dreamers at night. More importantly, we are daydreamers. Ask any human being, the richest of the rich, the poorest of the poor, and ask him, are you satisfied with life as it is? No, sir, we want something else, we want something more. Why? Because we are carrying within us the dream of a perfect state. We are tired, we fight, we struggle, we win, we lose. But this dream doesn't die. This is something very unique to human being. If you look at the last few thousand years, we'll see that humanity has gone through many ups and downs. Many times it has succeeded, failed, all kinds of things have happened. But we see that the dream of a perfect world has never died. Not only never died, it comes back like a rebound. I mean, if you look at the two world wars in the previous century, if you look at the asura of, communism and imperialism, sorry for using the adjective, and all kinds of things, fascism, we still see normally by this time human beings would have turned cynics. Immediately after the post-Second World scenario, to some extent there was a cynicism, but this cynicism broke free from all the established pattern and a new cry arose in human beings of an even better and more perfect world. We see this cry everywhere. This cry is there in the little, in the self-suffering, self-effacing woman who sacrifices everything for the sake of the family. Still she carries a dream that one day probably the world will be a better place where I will have my own freedom, where I can study, I can make my daughters study. This is a dream. And this dream is there in even those who have suffered and struggled. Now the fact that we carry a dream within us is the sign that one day we will realize this dream. Now what Sri Aurobindo comes to tell us? He comes to tell us that yes, your dream is valid, unlike many spiritual thinkers which have rubbished the dream. They speak of the world itself as a dream, and therefore they say, how can a dream within a dream be doubly true? See, this is the paradox in Savitri. When we read, Death uses this term to Savitri. That okay, you are dreaming of a perfect world. You are dreaming of an ideal creation. But you yourself are a dream. This world is a dream. How can the dream within a dream be true? Therefore, the only spiritual approach, if at all is valid, is discard the myth of an ambiguous world. And therefore, the only logical choice, though not at all logical, is to merge yourself into the supreme, into some absolute, into a state of nirvana. But as many people we can take through the gates of nirvana, not that it's an easy task, it's equally a tough task, but even if there were people who go towards nirvana, this dream will continue to haunt earth. It is there even in monasteries. Go to monasteries, you will see that there are people who are still dreaming of their monastery becoming a beautiful place, where there is no ambition, no, because it finds. Now when we look at it, we see that all these things which we call as anomalies in the world actually feed the flame of the dream. Because the world is not perfect, this dream is nurtured, nourished, it is fanned, and for the first time we have someone both bold and courageous, and of course someone who has the entire experience not only of the future, but as I said, the leap of faith. He has the leap of vision. Sri Aurobindo, the leap of vision. He went into the future and he says, well, we have got it wrong. This is not an illusion. From dust to man, is the entire thing illusion? It's easy to say that our senses are fooling us. Everybody understands. But the senses don't fool us in this way that there is nothing. The senses fool us in this way that there is something which I don't really experience through these senses, because the senses are limited. But there is something. We can't say there is nothing. So he reminds us that, well, this dream that mankind has nurtured, this journey from dust to man, is not going to end with man. This dream is valid, and the fact that man is dreaming more and more of it, the fact that knowledge has reached its bursting point, the fact that humanity has felt stifled and crushed under the weight of the Titan and its footsteps and the battle and the wars, the time has come for this dream to be realized. This dream is valid, and what is more important is that he says the time has come to realize it, and it is now. So we may say ki now, but all around we see corona and confusion. So the mother tells us very beautifully, my child, we are living in one of those hours of God when there is much confusion because the old bases are shaken. Precisely the confusion is a sign. You see, whenever some new building has to come up, what do? Even if we modify the old building, for some time that building becomes not fit for use. Something like our humanity, not fit for use for the moment, because so much given to lust and greed and anger and wanton ambition. We don't know today whether to trust corona or whether to trust the vaccine, whether to trust the politician or the scientist. This is the kind of confusion that we are going through. And this is because all the old bases, established bases are being shaken. But then she adds, but this is a time when we can take a wonderful leap towards the future. Now, why this is the time when there is confusion that we can take a wonderful leap towards the future? We have such interesting stories in the Ramayana and in our legends. So, one instance that I remember from the Ramayana, which is a leap towards the future, is Vibhishna. The story of Vibhishna. So, Vibhishna is, prince, a royal prince. He is the third son of the great, Titans dynasty, and obviously he is a everything is made of gold. And so he's also one of the rich guys who can just go anywhere and, everybody will respect him. But Vibhishna is not happy within his comfort zone. He experiences a pang within his heart that everything is fine. It's a golden city. But the heart is not yet of gold. And he dreams of a day when this heart of man can change into gold. Now what happens? There's a lot of chaos and confusion in Lanka. People have a choice to change over, to take a leap into this dream. But everybody stays back. Why? Because who can leave this city of gold? After all, Ravana may be a bad guy, but after all, he is looking after us. Lot of money, lot of wealth, everything he pours in. He is giving us free television. He is giving us free money. He is giving us, we don't even have to vote for him. Yet he is giving us everything free. But Vibhishna is not happy with that freedom. He says, I want another freedom. And that freedom he is looking for. And we see Hanuman comes and there is more chaos added to the confusion. First thing that happens in Lanka is chaos to confusion. But there is one man who listens to the voice of confusion and he takes a wonderful leap towards the future. And what is that future? He knows that for all the glory and greatness and might of Ravana, this kingdom is bound to collapse. It has been prophesied. Nobody believes it. Nobody listens. He says, how can the empire of Ravana ever collapse? That too, who is standing at the doorsteps? A mere mortal. Our king is great. He has tied even the gods. His technology is so advanced. How can this collapse? But Vibhishana knows that the future is with Rama, barefooted Rama, because Rama represents a nobler humanity. So he goes, changes, he doesn't change side. He goes towards the future. This is the leap towards the future. Nobody knows. He has gone before the war has even actually been declared. I mean, there is a war going to be. But he has changed the side. Anybody would have told him, you are doing a foolish act. And yet, Vibhishana knows in his heart that no, this is the only sensible thing to do. So today, we see a similar situation. The crumbling of big empires. But we want to hold on to our comfort zone, there is confusion. Because when there is storm, the cyclone, all the huts and everything is blown away. This dense night. But there are some, as very beautifully I heard in the introduction, that there are some all over the world who aspire for a new world. And it is to them that the mother calls, come, yes, there is a new world, there is a new possibility. Will you collaborate? What is that new future? It is not about making our outer conditions better. It's not about changing government. It's not about having a better technology. It's not about having a better economic system. Because all technology, economics, government, politics is the result of man. And if man doesn't change, give him the best system. It is like giving coconut in the hands of monkey. So if it doesn't break it on floor, he will throw it on you. Because that's monkey nature. You make a very good system. You make a law which is perfect. Man, he will find a way to bypass the law. You make everybody rich and man will find a way to mount his greed and exploit, because this is what human nature is. So the solution that Sri Aurobindo brings, it's not a solution, it's not a philosophy, it's a certitude. And the certitude comes not because he has thought or imagined or philosophized things. It's because he went into the future and come back. Not only that, I would say he is coming from the future into the present. So at one place the mother says, Sri Aurobindo is not the past, he is the future who came into the present to announce that look here, there is something. When did he go into the future? We don't know. If we look into the past lives of Sri Aurobindo and the mother, we don't know when they went into the future. But they came from the future, that much we can say. They came as announcers of the future. What did they announce? Very simply, man is here to be surpassed. Number one. Now the moment we hear it, there is commotion. What? We are redundant? Well, we don't need to hear from Sri Aurobindo that we are soon becoming redundant. Our children are reminding us that we are becoming redundant. In every house, there is a child who reminds his parents every day that dad, you are becoming redundant. Mom, you don't understand things. Students who tell teacher, I am so happy that there is a teacher who is so friendly with students. But otherwise, the norm is just the opposite. Students, they are very nice. Good morning, sir. Good evening, sir. But deep behind, he is old fashioned. He doesn't understand. Because we are becoming redundant as a species, and right within our midst a new species is coming up. Where do we look for it? Don't look for it immediately into the physical change. The difference between the chimpanzee who walked out of the jungle to build a computer and the chimpanzee who stayed back was not visible immediately in the outside. The difference was that the chimpanzee who walked out of the jungle went out in search of something that it had seen, and that was fire. Somewhere it saw some human being lighting a fire. It said, "Oh, this is something marvelous. We don't know how to do it." And as the story goes, Greek mythology, this man, rather the god, Prometheus, he got the fire to man. And he was punished by gods. What have you done? Why? Because now man will become equal to the gods. So he's punished by Zeus. That now you see, man is going to become equal to the gods. Why have you done it? But man is born to become equal to the gods. So we see now a new trend. When we see in children this change of consciousness, which is how this is going to announce itself. The outer is also happening, but it will happen as a result. All evolution is first declares itself in a change of consciousness. And then this consciousness, as it grows, it feels stifled within the form. It wants the form to change. We want ideal love, flawless happiness, perfect knowledge. Our brain gets tired. It gets tired even reading a little bit of Sri Aurobindo. Says, "Oh, Sri Aurobindo is very difficult, I feel asleep." That's why we should read more. But we find a novel solution. No need to read. Well, when we read, our brain will grow and develop. Our hearts get tired of love. Look at people, people love each other for how long? Very soon the heart gets tired of love. It feels sweetness for an hour. As in Savitri we have that line, the gods are still too few in human forms. Our love, the angel of love, is given only 1 hour to live and love. Look at life. It tends to turn into a routine mechanical life. Youngsters have so much josh. After some time, the sign that a person is growing old is, he thinks that, well, life is the way it is continuing. Young, he wants to conquer life. He wants challenges. But as we grow older, we want comfort zones. So to keep that youthfulness, this is happening in children. They want to break free. Something in them, it is expressing itself in strange tendencies. They don't want those norms because they want something new. They want challenges. They are looking for something which they don't understand what is it. And that's why the task of us educators is to show them what that new challenge is. That new challenge is not getting a new degree. That new challenge is not becoming the old laggard human being again. That new challenge is breaking free of our humanity and emerging into a vaster intelligence, a greater and more luminous force of life, a mightier and sweeter and unfading flower of love within our hearts, and eventually even a body that is new, transparent, a body that does not cover the soul. Right now, what kind of body it is? Everybody says there is a soul within, and yes, it's true in spiritual experience. We find the soul. But why don't we just see it just like that? Because the body is a cloak that obscures it. And that's why spirituality of the past said, discard the body. Even a great and mighty spirit like Swami Vivekananda, I am not even calling him a soul, because soul of course, but he is a mighty spirit coming from the higher realms. And when he leaves the body, what does he do? He comes in the vision of one of his disciples, and he tells him in the language of the Upanishads, "I have spat my body." Literally, that my body I have spit out and I am going. And look at the contrast, Sri Aurobindo, separated by less than 100 years, 50 years. And what is Sri Aurobindo's? He doesn't say, "I have spat my body." He says this body is destined for becoming luminous, golden, freed from the clutch of death. And by his own so-called death, he gives us an example that the thing can be done here and now. So what happens when he withdraws? Now we are, this talk is taking place on 6th December, and we know 5th to 9th December, when Sri Aurobindo left his physical body, not only the body was aglow with a supramental light. People will say, oh, some people saw, thousands of people, tens of thousands march around and saw it. But very interesting, as a doctor, I can say that though there were no heartbeat, no breath, there was no rigor mortis. It's something which starts within few hours of physical death. Within 24 hours, the body is all stiff. But the French doctors came because they were very unhappy. They were very unhappy that you want to keep the body for more than 24 hours. And you want to give a burial inside? How can that be allowed? It's French administration. So the French doctor eventually agreed that he will come and examine. So every 24 hours, there was a French doctor coming and examining Sri Aurobindo's physical body. 24 hours gone, 48 hours gone, and it's documented that 48 hours, and French doctor says it's a miracle. I don't know how it is happening. There is no rigor mortis. The body is as soft as it would be in any other human being. So supramental golden light is one aspect. It was available to the subtle vision, which was granted to many. But how can, this is something gross, and here is a doctor who has no faith, who has come to announce that yes, he has died, and let's give him burial. He says, I am helpless because the body has no signs of death except that there is no heartbeat and no breath. So, what did he come to demonstrate? Look here, matter can be impregnated with the supramental light, a new consciousness, a new light, a new possibility. Look at the contrast. Spirituality of the world, body is an obstacle. World is an illusion. All that we experience in life is eventually an illusion. All our dreams are fancies, fantasies, unreal, untrue. A dream within a dream. So what is real? The one alone, Shivoham, Shivoham, Satchidanandoham. And suddenly, through all this door of spirituality, a new spirituality enters into a human being saying, no, tathastu, to all the dreams. Right from the age of Rama, man has dreamed of an ideal world, Ram Rajya, of an ideal kingdom, kingdom of heaven upon earth, of an ideal state. And as Sri Aurobindo puts it in one of his poems, In the Moonlight, he says, lo, it has come, the city of gold. What John of Patmos saw, what Shelley dreamed, vision and vain imagination deemed. The city of delight, the age of gold. But that's where I want to, bring out this little sad twist in the tale. The sad twist is, all our life, everybody wants this world to become perfect. A beautiful place. All thinking creatures. I'm not speaking of, like all of us who are, attending this, surely we are all, at least we want this world to become a better place. That's why we are participating in a thing like this. And there are people like that all over the world. But when it comes to, what are you going to contribute? No. World must become a better place. Government or somebody else. My task is to complain to God. Why you made this world? Why you made me? My task is only to continue with my old way of life. It's God's business. But God's business is with the help of man. That's the problem with man is that evolution till man is without his conscious collaboration. Animal changes into man, and though in Ramayana, if we take it as an evolutionary tale, there is something like a conscious collaboration even at the monkey level. But with human beings, it has to be with a conscious collaboration. We as human beings can't say that, well, we have nothing to do. One day this world will become gold and I will enter into it as, Titans wanting to enter into heaven without paying the price, wanting the nectar of immortality without deserving it. So that's where the whole thing hangs now. The new world is here, pressing upon this world. From 29th February 1956, a new world, a new consciousness become to act. There are many signs which one can talk about. The breaking of the boundaries of knowledge. You see, 56 onwards, two things happen which are very obvious signs. Leave aside everything else. Mother declared 29th February 1956, a new consciousness is active, the supramental consciousness, it has begun to manifest. What was its first manifestation? Twofold. Man in 1959 landed on moon, or the Apollo mission. 60 we can say almost. He started exploring space. He said, well, I'm not happy with here. And he went to space, drew the powers of space. Thanks to that, we are having now a webinar like that. And man started exploring inner space. It's documented that from 1960s, two kinds of inner movements started. One was yoga became a household word. What Sri Aurobindo had predicted in 1914, in the very first page of Synthesis, Indian yoga must rediscover itself. Yoga was no more in ascetic schools. that, oh, there are some secret schools of initiation where you will go, Guruji will give Guru Diksha, you wear this kind of robe, now you change your name and practice yoga there. No. Yoga started becoming a household name, so much so that today we have, thanks to our Honorable Prime Minister, that today we have an International Day of Yoga. Interestingly, if we believe in the harmony of dates, on 21st June, and 21st June, which is the International Yoga Day, is the day when the Arya was conceived and launched, declared publicly. What is Arya? It is rediscovering yoga. And what is 21st June now? International Yoga Day. So it's very interesting that this new consciousness, as the mother said, the realization is proceeding at jet speed. So one route was this, yoga became household. Now we have yoga as a big business, it's gone beyond household. So that's another story. If you don't know anything to do Savasana. Master the art of Savasana perfectly. This is humorous, by the way. So, please don't be serious about it. But because this is what is supported by the age. It's not about people being wrong. The present age is supporting every effort which is in the direction of rediscovering man. So it is supporting. So people who are entering into this, they are, because this is the Yuga Dharma. And on the other hand, in the 60s, we see there was an explosion of a new alternate counterculture. Those who are conversant with the whole, sociology, they know what counterculture is. It came in the West in the form of flower children. Drugs. Paradoxical way. But why? Because they want to break free from the molds of the past. They want something new. They don't know what. The yogis reached and meddled with drugs, mixed with drugs in the West. Very interesting. And then these people who were into drugs discovered that no, there is another way to have a high. I don't need to go on the chilam. There is an inner Shiva. You don't need that Shiva which is portrayed. So they went and discovered the real chilam, the original bhang, which intoxicates us, the original somras, the ananda of creation. On the other side, we also see in India, there was again a movement all over the world of women live, the freedom movement, children, revolution in education, every sphere, call it, and there are so many signs that a new world is beginning to appear. Well, if we look at the ruins and the pulling down of the ramparts, well, God is cruel. All the people in Ravana's Lanka would have been cursing God. See, Ravana is such a great Shiva Bhakta. What is Shiva doing for him? He is destroying such a wonderful city. So if we want to look at that way, that Lanka is burning, well, we can look at it like that. But Shiva would have smiled and told them, my child, I want to bring Ayodhya here, because long back Ravana had aspired that Shiva, I want to bring you to this place. But he wanted to capture him for his purposes, and Shiva doesn't come. We know that story, in Devghar. But it's very paradoxical story, Shiva is granted, I will come. So what happened? So Shiva has thrown up entire Lanka into flames. Why? Why Shiva? Of course, Hanuman is who else but Shiva in his Rudra Roop. He is the Gyarva Rudra. So Shiva said, I will come. His promise stood. He gave Ravana time to change. Ravana didn't change. So he threw up the whole Lanka into flames. Then Lord Rama, whom Shiva reveres and who reveres Shiva, he enters. Before that, Shiva himself comes as Hanuman, throws the whole city in flames. People cry, cruel God, cruel Shiva. But Shiva will do what he must do. As Rudra, he destroyed. Then in his benevolent form, he walks in as Rama and establishes a new way of life, a nobler way of life, an Aryan way of life with Vibhishna as the king. The same thing is happening today. The mother said very clearly, categorically, that this 50 years back, her message, incidentally, almost 50 years back. We are celebrating 50 years of many things. One of them is of this message. Men, countries, continents, the choice is imperative. Truth or the abyss. Next year she says, it is the hour of God. Then she says, are you ready? Another message is a new world based upon truth is born. Refusing its old slavery to falsehood is born. There are people, there are men in all over the world who want it, who feel it, not exact words, but to that extent, who sense it. It is to them we call, will you collaborate? And this will you collaborate, this message, truth or the abyss, is not just a moment's message, it rings and will continue to ring forever in human consciousness till it makes a choice. Do we want to belong to the past, which is going to crumble and go away, or we belong to the future and we are ready to take a leap towards the future? The leap towards the future comes when we understand that all that human beings have ever discovered, made, built, created is insufficient. It starts when we understand the insufficiency of the intellect to solve the human problems which in one place it has created. It's our mind which has created. How? Through the process of division. Everything, all our mental knowledge is based on division. This is distinct, this is separate, this is separate, this is separate. All the analysis is based on division. Our languages are based on division. Animals are better. They don't know how to talk, but they don't fight because they understand the language of the heart. But human beings, they have a language to communicate. And the first thing we do with that is to end up fighting. Say, this is mine. Why? Because he speaks my language. That fellow is not mine. Why? He doesn't speak my language. What is language? It's an expression of consciousness. All communication is a communication in consciousness. So there is another, this is one part of humanity, this entire world built by the mind. And do we want to belong to that? We believe still that intellect can solve the human problems? Fine, we can try. We can change comments, we can have more technology, we can think that by doing research in this area or that area we can discover some magic. Fair enough. But there are some human beings who have seen through the whole process. They have understood the insufficiency of the intellect. And they felt the vacuum in the heart of humanity. And therefore, they are taking steps to go beyond the mind, not discarding it, but informing the mind and its insufficiency with a greater light. And similarly, they have understood that this vacuum in the heart is the real cause of our misery. All our unhappiness and suffering is because we are suffering from one of the most necessary vitamins, which is not C and D, but which is F and L and G. And that vitamin F comes from the heart, it is faith. That vitamin L comes from the heart, it is love. That vitamin G comes from the heart, which is grace. And it is this, when human beings understand that insufficiency of being human, and they have the faith. Faith, why? Some people ask, how do you know? I said, how do I know? Leave aside. Do I have faith in what Sri Aurobindo is saying? Look at his life, the tapasya, the mighty intellect. At any point when we read Sri Aurobindo's life, can we even imagine that he would say something just like that? Look at his records of yoga, the way meticulously he kept, forget about, even if the whole world were to say today, no, this is fantasy. I would say what Sri Aurobindo has said is true. Because my eyes may delude me, but he has seen through the iron wall and through the topaz wall. And since he has seen, I have faith in Sri Aurobindo. And if he has said that there is a new world, a new creation which is going to come, it is going to come. So let me just stop because of paucity of time, and otherwise one loves to flow with this. Let me just stop with 4 or 5 lines from Savitri, where he describes the new creation. This is page 343, 344, where first he describes the old creation which is crumbling down. The unfolding image showed the things to come. A giant dance of Shiva toward the past. Once again, Shiva in his Rudra Roop, like Hanuman going and destroying Lanka. The past is not just some past. The entire human past with all its arrogance and ignorance that is being torn aside. There was a thunder as of worlds that fall. We hear it, we have heard it, the first 2 great wars, and there's more to come. Earth was overrun with fire, and the roar of death, clamoring to slay a world his hunger had made. This is the burning of Lanka, because the kingdom of Rama has to come. Are we ready? But he also sees, I saw the omnipotent's flaming pioneers come crowding down the amber stairs of birth, the new children. They are going to change the world, not governments, not technology. Something new has happened, and the mother speaks about it even in 58. A new element, substances merged with matter, and the children now will assume a new body. The body itself has that new element. It's like a new chip, divine chip. Just as we have malware, this is divine ware. So this is going to begin to work upon humanity. I saw them cross the twilight of an age, the sun-eyed children of a marvelous dawn. And there is a beautiful description of what these children are. But I'll read only the last few lines. Although fate lingers in the high beyond, and the work seems vain on which our heart's force was spent, all shall be done for which our pain was born. Even as of old, man came behind the beast, behind his vain labor, behind this high divine successor surely shall come. Behind man's inefficient mortal pace, behind his vain labor, sweat and blood and tears, he shall know what mortal mind barely does think. He shall do what the heart of the mortal could not dare. What we could not dare? We have gone into space, but we couldn't still cross the boundaries of the mind. We couldn't cross the dangerous spaces of the soul and touch the mighty mother stark awake. Inheritor of the toil of human time, he shall take on him the burden of the gods. Earth's deeds shall touch the superhuman's height. Earth's seeing widen into the infinite. So friends, this is not a talk. This is just an invitation to a new world. All are welcome. The prize is very little or very big depending on how we value it. No money is asked. There is no course in Sri Aurobindo's yoga where you have to pay money. If somebody is asking money, please don't enter into it. There is another prize. The prize is slay the ego. Be ready. Say to oneself that the limits of the mind has been reached, but there is something greater. The prize is to aspire to go beyond the rational and the infra-rational to the supra-rational, intuitive age. The prize is to install God in place of the ego. The prize is to install faith in place of doubt. Optimism in place of despair, pessimism. This is the prize. It's easy if we look at what we are going to receive. It's too much if we are thinking about what we are going to leave behind. The choice is ours. Men, countries, continent, the verdict has gone. Men, countries, continents, the choice is imperative. Truth or the abyss. Thank you, sir.